BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show. Today's date is January 29th. It's a Wednesday. This is the A Block. I say that because of the fact that a lot of people don't listen to the show live, although we do it live. It's live right now. If you're listening on KSLQ 104.5 or on our stream, it's every day, 7 to 8 o'clock, Monday through Friday. I keep saying, John, let's do, Armstrong and Getty do 7 days a week on our stage. John, let's do 7 days a week. Let's do Saturday and Sunday as well too. What do you think, huh?
Yeah, I mean, that'll be a commensurate increase in pay, correct?
Yeah, we'll double it. That's John Combest. Every single day of his life for the past 23 plus years, he gets up. Actually, do you do this in the morning? You do it at night. You do it in the morning, correct?
Yeah, I do it. If I did it at night, I'd miss 3/4 of the stories. Yeah, I do it every morning.
Okay, does it every morning. Puts together this list of all the important stuff you should know going on in the state of Missouri. Sometimes dozens of things. Sometimes 3 and 4 dozen things. Depends on what the news is going on, what the news cycle is, what's going on, what's interesting, that kind of stuff. We start off this show with this guy. What's your name again, sir?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he does the countdown thing, right?
We're on our way to the number one.
And we start with?
In third place.
We'll start close to home, Brad. Within the sound of our voice, within our broadcast signal. In Warren County, near Wright City, a company called America's Heartland Packing is creating a new beef processing facility there. They announced that back in 2022, but they just announced that they are on track to open in April, Brad. They're going to hire around 1,300 employees in Warren County around Wright City for beef processing. And Missouri Ag Director Chris Chin, she says the facility is a game changer and it will have a vast economic impact, not just in the region, Brad, but in the state of Missouri. So good news for folks. If folks are looking for a new job in Warren County, maybe folks that can travel to Warren County or Wright City, a brand new beef processing facility, Brad.
John, the suburbs have gotten further west. Matter of fact, T.R. Hughes, the home builder, is now talking about they have a new development in Warren County. I believe it's in Forestell. Or no, not Forestell. It's in Truesdale, which is a little tiny area to the east of Warrenton. Actually, they sort of abut each other. And there's developers doing stuff in Wright City. So the boundary lines of St. Charles County, when you used to say, if you lived in Forestell, people go, oh my God, you live way out west.
Yeah, that was the end of the world, wasn't it?
Right, not anymore. So I drive that stretch of 70 all the time. Do you know which side of 70 is on? It's on the north or south side. Do you know which side?
I don't know. No, I haven't done a Google Earth search of that, Brad.
I'll have to go and take a drive on that. Okay, we ready for number 2?
We are.
Up a notch to number 2.
As we've talked about for the last few days, Governor Mike Kehoe had his State of the State address yesterday afternoon, and he laid out a whole host of budgetary wish list items, Brad. Now, we knew that he would focus on crime and public safety. He also mentioned how he plans to eliminate the state income tax, ways to look at the state education foundation formula, things he might do for healthcare, and a number of budgetary items. Now, Brad, on my website, I generally go for quality and not quantity. But I will say there's probably about a dozen, maybe a little more than a dozen pieces up that analyze the governor's State of the State. I would suggest people start with Jason Rosenbaum, because Jason goes through and not only lays out piece by piece what's in the broad strokes of the budget, but also gets Democratic response to what Governor Kehoe said. Brad, as you might expect, Democrats are not crazy about the idea of cutting Missouri's income tax. Because the logic is, if you cut the income tax, where are the cuts in spending going to come? And that's a pretty viable point pointed out by Democrats, including House Superminority Leader Ashley Awney raises that question. So a whole lot of coverage today on the State of the State.
Is there such a thing? You said, I don't mean to contradict you, but a superminority leader? Is that really a term, superminority? You got super
Yeah.
injured. So,
yeah, we've probably used it 40 or 50 times here on the show, Brad. If you lead a minority, you're a minority leader. If you lead the super minority, you're a superminority leader. Now, her title, as it would be listed in a state directory, wouldn't say superminority. It would say House Minority Leader Ashley Awney. But to be more clear, Brad, we're just being helpful and calling her a superminority leader.
But if you said Superman, you'd think of this guy with big muscles and he can fly and bullets don't bother him. But if you're using it for someone who is of lesser stature, like is the minority, doesn't the word super sort of become a contradictory term?
It is. It's a bit of a conundrum, isn't there, Brad? And let's not forget, Superman had great hair. Now, I'm not a hair product guy, but it kind of looked like he had a little something to do that curl thing, but he did have great hair.
Well, I'm a great hair guy, thanks to Hans Wyman. If it wasn't for Hans, I'd have no hair.
That's true. We might have time at the end of A Block to tell a Hans Wyman story, Brad.
Okay, are we done with that one? We're moving.
We are.
We're moving along too quick this morning. Okay, here we go.
The number one.
Two stories that are sure to raise some hackles, Brad. First is Eric Schmitt is pointing out how China seems to be gaining a little bit of influence in the Panama Canal. Schmidt's pointing out that China's building a bridge there. They have stations on both ends of the Panama Canal. And he seems to support Donald Trump's position that we need to take advantage and take over the Panama Canal again. We can get back to that in a second, Brad. I'd also point out that the MissouriNet, points out that Ann Wagner has been appointed. She will remain as part of the U.S. delegation to NATO, NATO's Parliamentary Assembly. You know, they go in and they decide. It's America's voice on how foreign funds are spent, how NATO spends its time and its resources. Speaker Mike Johnson says that she can remain on that panel. So two big global stories involving Missourians, and in fact, involving Missourians from right here in the St. Louis area. Now, Brad, I don't know much about the Panama Canal, and you've mentioned this before on the show, but is it true that China has their hooks in the Panama Canal, and is this something you think we should be worried about?
Yeah. Do you know what the whole deal with it China calls, I don't know if they've called this, but everybody refers to it as what they call their Belt and Road Project. You know what I'm talking about?
No, remind me what that is.
Okay, this is China's infrastructure program that they offer to countries all over the world. And essentially what they do is they come in and they say, hey, we'll build a new bridge for you. We'll do this. We'll do that. We'll build a new airport for you. In return, we want blah, 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 blah. They call it Belt and Road. I don't know exactly what that has to do with. I think when they're talking about like Belt and Road, they're talking about like infrastructure, like, you know, inner belt and roads and things like that.
I see. Okay.
But yep. China has been making constant inroads into Panama as well too, and what they do is, like I said, they offer the governments money for this, that, you know, mainly infrastructure projects, and then there are, you know, it's sort of like the drug dealer thing. Hey, guess what? I got this really nice stuff. It's going to make you feel good, and you know what? No charge for the first couple of times.
The first one's free.
Right, you're going to love it. It's going to make you feel better than you've ever felt before. And then when you get hooked, you go, hey man, can I have another hit? Oh no, sorry, it's going to cost you now. That's what people are accusing them, that China's sort of like the drug dealer of the thing. I'll look it up and give a little bit more background to that. But that's the common complaint. Now, the crazy thing about that is we complain about China, but think about what the United States has done. We've essentially done the same thing for decades, for centuries. You know, I mean, and perfect example is the Panama Canal. You know, we went in and built that, you know, lots of blood and treasure behind that. And then the guy that we just, you know, honored so much, Jimmy Carter, gives it away. I mean, to this day, when I was a young man and Jimmy Carter was president, when they talked about this, I'm going like, I don't understand. Why are we giving that away? Why are we giving that to the Panama people?
Yeah.
We built it. We paid for it. It would just be like, you know, like if someone gave you, if you're going to build a new house and you had a concrete company that gave you all the concrete and a lumber company gave you all the lumber and all the building materials, and then you'd say, hey, it's my house. They go, no, it's our house. It technically would be their house because of the fact they paid for all the infrastructure. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I mean, that model was essentially what he did with Habitat for Humanity, right? I mean, he just went and you'd have a bunch of college kids that have to volunteer because it's their sorority or fraternity philanthropy event. And then they just kind of do as Brad would say, a half donkey job during the day. And you get shoddy craftsmanship. And then you just give the house to some poor people. And they're like, oh, gee, thanks. I can't walk on this floorboard over here because the frat boys were hungover that Saturday morning, but thanks.
It's like, there's an example of this. Do you remember these TV shows where they used to do what they call the blitz build? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Where they would build a house like in 24 hours and stuff
Super
like that.
fast, yeah.
Right. And then people would buy the house and the foundation would be falling apart and, none of the corners were square and the electrical
It wasn't
system.
exactly union craftsmanship. It's kind of like when you bought your Sears catalog house, Brett.
It's funny. It's funny you should mention that. I have this set of, you're going to laugh when I tell you this, but, I'm a nerd about a lot of stuff. I have a set of numbering dies and lettering dies. You know what I'm talking about? There are these things.
Yeah, I do. Wow. Okay.
You get a hammer, and like, for example, I have a new key that I got yesterday, and I have it on my key ring, and I take out these dies, and I hit them with the hammer. In other words, I wanted to put, this was for my car, which is a Focus, so I got out the FOCUS, and I tapped it into this key. You put the thing on, you whack it with a hammer, puts an F in there, okay? And it comes in this very nice wood case. And I thought to myself, God, how long have I had this? On the top of the case, I engraved the fact with the very die set that I bought this in March of 1984. And guess where it came from? The sticker on
Sears Roebuck.
Sears, Roebuck and Company. I ordered this through the catalog in the old days when you could get the Sears catalog, and I ordered this through the catalog, and it got delivered to, I do remember this, it got delivered to the Northwest Plaza store of Sears. At the time, I didn't live too far from that because I lived up in Hazelwood, up in North Hanley, and I remember driving down to Sears and picking up my number set and things like that, and I'm thinking to myself, okay. And this is the weird thought I thought to myself. Back then, Sears was like untouchable. They were like the retail powerhouse. Do you think in 10 or 20 or 30 years, we'll look back and say, God, remember when Walmart had all their stores? Remember they had stores everywhere. They had super centers. They were 200,000 and 300,000 square foot places. And you had to like get a one of those, what do you call them? What do you call them? The obesity scooters? Hold on a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
You had to give it, even the healthy people had to get one of the scooters to go from one side of the store to the other. Do you think that we'll say that like in 20 or 30 years about Wally World?
We might, depending on how it's run. I mean, it's easy to look at things and say they're too big to fail. But look at what happened to Dillard's. Dillard's used to be a huge place. I mean, look at what happened to Circuit City. I mean, you're more of an expert on this than I am, Brad, but look at those big retailers and what happened to them.
Well, Famous Bar. Look at all the retailers that essentially revolved around malls. The interesting thing about that is a lot of people don't remember this, but where Chick-fil-A really started to gain ground? When they went in all the malls. Because there was a Chick-fil-A. I think there still is one at West County Center. There was one. Almost every mall, think about it for a minute. Almost every mall, there were like 20 stores that were in every single mall. You know what I'm saying? No matter what mall you went to.
You had Spencer's Gift. You had Chick-fil-A's. You even had the Tender Box at Jamestown Mall.
Right. Where you had all these stores that when the malls disappeared, where do they go? And that's the interesting thing. Like what was the lady's name? Debbie's Cookies. You know who I'm talking about? Mrs. Field.
Mrs. Fields, yeah.
Yeah, Debbie Fields. There was always a Mrs. Fields. I remember working for when I was running my own business, but I was still being hired out as engineering, from time to time. I remember when they did the grand opening for St. Louis Center, and everybody's going like, "Oh my God, this is going to be the world's best shopping center." And they talked about how the rent was some astronomical amount of rent, and it was so beautiful and was so wonderful. And what did that last? 10 years? 15 years? And
not long, yeah.
Now you go down and it's a big hulk of an empty place, and they're talking about one of the anchors. What was the Railroad Express building? Used to be able to walk over the Sky Bridge. Used to be able to walk the Sky Bridge on one side. You'd go in the Famous Bar, and on the other, which eventually became Macy's. The other Sky Bridge, you'd go into, I think it was Dillard's. Wasn't Dillard's on one end and Famous Bar on the other end? Wasn't that the deal like that?
I don't remember. Yeah.
God, how things change. And
there's a great video. Sorry to interrupt. There's a great video. The great Pete Parisi, who used to do Worldwide Magazine, was at the grand opening of St. Louis Center. And then he also did some videos later from St. Louis Center after its demise and decline. But it was a big to-do. And I remember, unless I'm mistaken, they had maybe even the Rams cheerleaders. I'm not sure exactly I don't know if the Rams were around then, but they had some civic group. And, they had a giant to-do and a band and everything like that.
Yeah. You couldn't get near the place. I mean, they were directing traffic. Or are you talking about Peter E. Parisi?
Yeah, PEP.
Do you know the background to him?
No, I don't know the background. I mean, he was a cab driver. I don't know much. I used to watch Worldwide Magazine by way of watching South Broadway Athletic Club wrestling.
Those of us
At night.
Those of us in the radio business remember him well, and those of us who've been in the radio business for a long time. He was the program director of the old KADI.
Okay. What station was that? Was that a talk station or AM?
No, that was the station I got fired from by Richard Miller on Christmas morning. He called me.
No way! That was that station.
Yeah, KADI was in it. It was the competitor at the time. It was the competitor to KSHE. We weren't quite as AOR, and AOR in the old days stood for album oriented radio. We weren't as quite as AOR because we did have somewhat of a playlist we followed, but we were playing. I don't know. Today it would probably be sort of a cross between KSHE and The Point. We were playing the classic stuff, which at that point wasn't necessarily classic because it was current stuff at the time. But PEP, and he had a voice like this. He talked like this. Is that the same guy? He talked like this. I'm Peter E. Parisi. And
yeah. Did you used to watch Worldwide Magazine?
No, but the crazy story about it was that supposedly this was crazy Richard Miller. Richard Miller took a cab somewhere, and PEP was the cab driver. And Richard Miller, they're talking back and forth, and Richard says, "You know what? I'm going to hire you as my program director." So he hired the guy's program director. The guy's never been in radio before. It's to the point where, and people that work for him. I knew people that worked there at the time. You either loved him or you hated him. Is he still alive?
It sounds like you're not. It sounds like you're. No, he died 20 plus years ago. It sounds like you're not crazy about him, Brad.
Well, there was a point in time when I had a real problem with what they were doing on the station. And do you really want me to tell this story? We've got 2 more minutes.
Yeah, when we come back, I mean, that he's got. There's a lot. That show had a cult following, and there's still people. There's a guy named Jim Viragona who has curated a number of all the old Worldwide Magazine shows and has them up on YouTube. I subscribe to the station, actually, because I think they're fascinating. I'd love to hear the PEP story.
Okay. First off, he did a bunch of weird stuff. And he hired some really bizarre people. Elliot Gamsett, a bunch of different crazy names, people that weren't in the radio business that he literally ran into bars. Hey, you should do a show on my radio station. And Richard loved this, And I'm not trying to say that someone who doesn't have the skill and the talent and the schooling can't be in the radio business. But it would sort of be like, if you're a surgeon and you're in a restaurant and you say to the server, "Hey, you know what? I love the way you put that food on my plate. You should be a nurse in my operating room." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You'd go like, no, that doesn't work real well. Okay, they were very heavily into drugs. And you know me, I'm not a drug guy, never have been. And at the time, does the term paraquat mean anything to you?
Oh, yeah, of course. It is a highly regulated. In fact, if you use paraquat, it has a giant skull and crossbones on it. It's a herbicide, by the way.
At the time, the DEA or whatever organization was, the federal government, was spraying fields of marijuana with paraquat. They would identify these fields that were in the United States, and I think in Mexico as well, too, and they would hire crop dusters, and they would crop dust the fields with paraquat to kill the marijuana. But some of the marijuana was harvested right after the paraquat was applied.
Oh.
And they would sell the marijuana, which was laced with paraquat, which, as you just said, it's a poison. It's skull and crossbones.
Yeah. Now, when you say they, you mean Pete Parisi's crew would sell it?
No. But what they did was on the air, he would talk. He would give these editorials. "Hi, this is PEP," and then what they did was he would give the tests to figure out if your marijuana had paraquat. And they would say, "Okay, now here's what you do. You get a little," and he had the whole thing. You got I think you took a shot glass. You took your marijuana, you put it in a shot glass, and you put in this.
And you test it with iodine or something.
Yes,
to see.
You put chemicals in it, and depending upon what color it turned, you were okay. And I'm going like, I don't know about this. I just thought it was in bad taste. Just thought, to me, it's to the point where, see, the crazy thing about it is that's going back, 40 years or something like that when he was the program director. Yeah. Now we've got the state of Missouri that certifies our marijuana is just great because we've got inspectors that come around and
yeah.
How things have changed, right? Okay.
That's right.
To start off, Block B, which is coming up right after these words from our sponsors, I have a text that was sent to me about you, and it's pretty damn funny. Okay?
Ooh, great. I can't wait to hear it.
It's classic. It's classic John Combest. Okay, you ready? Here we go.